Hello again, friends. This is Mike. Today's podcast is going to be about basically the concept of hell. And I've talked about this before. That's not that it's a laughing matter, but I've talked about this before, and something came up recently that made me think about it again. And I just want to talk and reflect upon, what happens when we die, and talk about a few things that are mentioned in the Bible, but also some personal things. Here we go. Hello again, friends and fellow truth seekers. Mike Nicholas here with another episode of the Soul Unleashed podcast, where it's my goal to help you with questions you might have regarding the awakening of your soul, and particularly to help other left brain types, like I think I am, ask the right questions in our search for a deeper meaning to life. Ultimately, I want to help you unleash your soul from limiting beliefs and what I call smothering paradigms. So let's get started with today's discussion. Recently, I was watching a movie. I'm a big fan of Emma Stone, and when she won the Academy Award, and made me think of a movie that I'd seen her in years ago called Easy A, and I thought it was a really good movie, and so I went and watched it again. But there was something in there that I never really paid much attention to, but now in my current frame of mind, made me start thinking. And there was a scene where she goes to see this pastor, who turns out to be the father of her nemesis in high school, but she doesn't know at this point. And it's played by Fred Armisen, who's from Saturday Night Live. And he's a great actor, and it's only a little bit cameo part. But she's asking him about, what's worse. She says, I want to know what the church's stance is on lying and adultery. And he goes, it's not a good thing. And she goes, oh, I agree wholeheartedly. But then tell me this. Assuming there's a hell, and he cuts her off and he says, oh, the Christian church recognizes the existence of hell. And she says, okay, so we'll just say there's a hell. He said, there is, just so we're clear. She says, okay, but for argument's sake. And then he says, no, there's no argument. It's there, right below our feet, right above the Orient. And that was a great scene. So it made me think about the concept of hell. Now, Easy A, to be honest, that movie does not treat fundamentalist Christians anyway very well. They come off pretty badly in the movie and very judgmental, etc. But the concept of hell came up in the movie, and the way that Fred Armisen discusses it there, right below our feet, right above the Orient, made me think about, what people's concept of hell is. Now, when I've talked before in this podcast about that, I mentioned different things that I had read, and I went back to my faith that I grew up with. Part of the thing that we have when we're going through a spiritual awakening, I think, is we wonder whether or not we're going to be judged harshly by God for maybe not believing what we were taught to believe. So I grew up Catholic, right? So, will I be punished if I die for not believing everything that I was taught as a Catholic? You may have been raised as a Baptist. Will you be punished when you die for maybe questioning those things and not believing everything as a Baptist? But then there's so many different faiths, right? There's so many different perspectives on life and what happens, and many of us go through multiple faiths. I know plenty of people that have been, Catholic and then Protestant, and then a different type of Protestant denomination, and then nothing for a while, and then maybe something else they found. And so many people go through different phases of what to believe. And honestly, I'm not sure people examine what the faith is. They're looking for something that makes them feel good, feels positive about life. But I've tried to study the underpinnings, I guess, if you will, about what we learn, what we're taught, because I'm questioning everything. So in Catholicism, it's very clear that Catholics do believe in hell, and there's a lot of biblical references to hell, and there's also discussion about whether or not how many times hell's in the Bible, right? Does Jesus say hell, or does he say Gehenna? Is the word hell in the Old Testament, or is it a different word, a Hebrew word meaning just a place of the dead? I have to say, from the Catholic perspective, that there's no doubt that the Church teaches that there is a place called hell. And it refers numerous times, at least in the things I've read that are put out by organizations that support the Catholic Church. If you read Matthew chapter 24, Matthew chapter 25, in there pretty clearly, Jesus talks about going someplace that is not good, that you're going to go for eternal punishment. And, he says, you'll go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous will enter eternal life. And there's just a lot of things there. There's something in Ezekiel in the Old Testament where they talk about you will surely die, and the wicked will die in iniquity, but you will have your life saved if you're a good person. Timothy, St. Paul says to St. Timothy, take heed, do your teaching, and hold to that, for by doing so you will save both yourself and your hearers. So there's just different references to hell. People that believe that criticize the Bible, right? Criticize the interpretation of the Bible. I've heard this numerous times. The Bible was written by many people and assembled many times and went through many revisions. And who knows if what we're reading was the actual words that were used by Jesus or the actual words that were used by St. Paul or whatever. I'm a skeptic, but I would say in general that no matter how you phrase it or how you parse it or what words you pretend, say that God used or Jesus used, it does seem pretty clear that he was saying that there was a good place and a bad place. And if you do good things, you're going to go to a good place. You do bad things, you're going to go to a bad place. So that's part of what I was raised with, what I continue to believe in, but it's what I question. And part of the reason I question that is I've gone through this soul awakening thing, and after losing our son and going to mediums, and being no doubt in my mind that I was actually in contact with the soul or the spirit of my son as we exchanged information, numerous times this has happened. And it's convinced me in all the reading that I've done. I've read many different accounts by mediums, grown up as mediums, what they went through. I've interviewed numerous people that have this type of gift. And so the question I usually always ask them is, have you ever come across hell? Have you ever come across bad, a bad situation? They're always bringing people forward, and usually the message are of love and comfort. But what I want to know from them is, did anybody ever bring anything forward like, what's the movie with Scrooge? When the ghosts of Christmas past and come forward, the ghost of Christmas present, and they're basically saying, that you're going to suffer and die and go to hell, basically, unless you reform and repent. Is there any of that that's actually happened to all these mediums that I've experienced and those that I've read and those that I've interviewed? And the answer is no. None of them have had an experience where someone's come through and said, hey, I'm in heaven, but my husband's in hell, or I'm in heaven, but your Aunt Helen, she's in hell. No one, I haven't seen any of that. So that's just an empirical collection of my experience, right? That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I just haven't read it anyplace. You're welcome to contact me or share with me through MikeNicholas.com whether or not that's happened to you or you've read someplace where someone's come through legitimately, right? I mean, there's a bunch of nut jobs out there. I still think there's people that are a little bit off center, if you will, even though I'm willing to accept a whole lot of things. I get confused a little bit about eschatology or what happens when we die. And then I've read or listened to a bunch of people that are channeling spirits, right? Channelers are a little different from mediums. Mediums, somebody's bringing somebody through with a message for you from the other side. That has been a wonderful experience. I've done it many times, and I think that that's a valid gift that we're privileged to share in when someone does that. Channelers are people that listen to everything from aliens and spaceships with messages for Earth. Bashar is one of the people I can think of. Sarah Landon, she channels, and they bring people that are, or groups even, from other dimensions that are usually offering comfort and light to the world. This is in contrast, by the way. I spent some time working for an organization that did work for Catholic causes, and there are a lot of saints that do have messages of terrible, terrible things. Saint Faustina, For example, she talks about fire and hell and judgment coming, and there are a number of Catholic-related saints and mystics that have nothing but bad news. So, they're not necessarily bringing through a specific soul to talk to you, but it's all bad news. The messages of Fatima, when the Blessed Mother appeared in Fatima, which is the little municipality in Portugal, but the Blessed Mother appeared in Fatima prior to World War I, and it was very terrible messages that she had. In fact, there was one called the Third Secret of Fatima or something, which talked about horrible things that were going to happen, and only the Pope was privy to what that was. I'm not a big expert on Fatima. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of Medjugorje. I'm aware of Lourdes, of course. In a lot of those cases, Mary appears and has a message of love, but also messages of suffering and terrible things about to happen. So, people that believe in those, more power to you. I'm just not a believer personally in doom, fire and brimstone, the world coming to an end, that kind of thing. When you go back and read the Bible, I used to wonder about St. Paul and a lot of the apostles who were writing to the Corinthians and the other Catholic sects that were not Catholic, Christian sects that were in the world back in the early days of the church. And to many of them, they were saying, stay on guard, be alert, be vigilant. The world's going to end. And those people expected the world to end tomorrow, next week. They were vigilant and expecting things to happen, bad things to happen imminently. And of course, here we are now, over 2,000 years later, and there are still people that live that way, expecting bad things to happen any moment. So I'm of the position now, having gone through what I have experienced the past couple of years, where I believe that God or Spirit is love, and that's what we're striving for, is love. And I refuse to be intimidated by people who insist that I believe in hell. I refuse to be intimidated by people that would, I think, seek to manipulate me, causing me to believe in hell and be afraid and obey things or do things because I'm afraid of hell, or I'm afraid of being judged, or I'm afraid that I'm not doing things correctly. Heck, you can't even find an agreement among religions now where the Catholic Church at least believes that you're going to be judged based upon your works, and other churches believe, Christian churches, they believe in Jesus Christ, believe that your works have nothing to do with it. It's whether or not you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. I'm not going to get into that, go down that rabbit hole, because I've interviewed people that are Christians, very strong Christians, charismatic Christians, Baptists, Catholics. Everybody has really a slightly different vision of what happens when we die. And for some people, we get judged right away. For some people, we go to sleep and then we're going to wake up at Judgment Day. In my case, I believe, since this is my podcast, I'll tell you, but I believe that we die, we pass to a different dimension. We go through a period of healing and restoration, depending upon how badly our soul was hurt or injured or impacted during this lifetime. And for my son, that was a period of learning and reflection in school, if you will. And then you start preparing again to return to this life, to return to be an incarnate being and go through it again. And when you come back again, you've got other life lessons that you want to learn or other things that you want to accomplish. One of the things my son told me a couple of years ago when I first started going to medium was not to grieve for him, although that's pretty impossible, but not to grieve for him because he had done or accomplished what he wanted to do. He had accomplished in this life what he had set out to do, and that we've been together, he and I, in countless lives before, and we're going to be together in countless lives again. And just right now, in this period that I'm a human being on this earth right now, I don't remember any of those times. Sometimes in dreams, maybe I have flashes or memories that I can't explain. But I believe that I will go when I die through this period of rest and reflection. And my goal is to get closer to Source, get closer to God, get closer to love. I don't think my goal is to live this life in fear of being judged and doing the right thing by a vengeful God. And so that's where I am on that particular thing. Part of the dichotomy that I have, or the question I have, a lot of people have, is how can there be a loving God that prepares a place of eternal hell for us? How can there be a person that does this? And I was reading a recent thing online from Catholic, what's it called? Catholic.com. And I'm just going to read the last paragraph here, because this is how the Catholic Church thinks, and I don't get it. But the final paragraph here says, on Judgment Day, all will know that every person will have been judged rightly, and we will be able to see this with God's eyes, so to speak. The blessed will be able to rejoice in God's justice and mercy. In fact, only heaven will reveal in full the reality that justice and mercy are actually absolutely one in our infinitely just and infinitely merciful God. So what they were referring to in this paragraph is somebody asked the question, look, how can we be happy in heaven, if I'm in heaven and my children are in hell, or if I'm in heaven and my wife is in hell? How can I enjoy eternal happiness knowing that that person I loved or was so close to on earth is in hell? And basically, which I think is complete bullshit, is that, again, reading this page, it says, we can and we should indeed rejoice in the good that is justice. You could say in a joyful way that justice was served today, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry, but that doesn't resonate with me. And I believe there is a loving power that controls the universe, a loving power that has organized the universe, infinitely vast and superior to anything that we can comprehend, and that it's not vengeful or vicious or petty, and that this power does not want to punish us, but wants us to seek love and seek happiness. And that's kind of how I'm going to live my life. And that's kind of why I'm doing this podcast, is because in terms of the Soul Unleashed thing for me, that whole perspective has changed from how I grew up and how I've approached life. And now I approach it happy. I don't fear death. I know it's easy to say, but I'm not afraid I'm not afraid for what comes next. I'm excited about rejoining my family and my relatives and my son, who are in spirit, my parents. I'm happy that day is going to come, and I'm looking forward to that. And in this life now, while I'm here, I want to bring joy and love to people that I want to be with and enjoy being with, and my grandchildren. But I refuse to live in fear. I refuse to live in fear of being judged and going to hell. Anyway, that's it. Got a little carried away, a little bit longer than I want to this week. Thank you. But appreciate you listening. Again, you can reach out to me if you want. Either respond to this podcast on my website, MikeNicholas.com, or you can just reach me at mike@MikeNicholas.com. Again, thank you for listening. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.